What happens when three popular girls decide to destroy the quiet new student, not knowing she's been documenting every single move they make? What they discovered about Emma Rodriguez in just 24 hours will leave you speechless. This isn't just about standing up to bullies. This is about how one girl's hidden talents turned the tables so completely that her tormentors ended up on their knees, desperately begging for mercy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Rocky Mountains surrounding Riverside, Colorado, as students streamed through the glass doors of Riverside Valley High School. Built just 5 years ago with modern architecture and state-of-the-art technology labs, the school prided itself on being progressive and forward-thinking. Yet beneath its polished exterior, the same age-old dynamics of teenage hierarchy played out daily in its gleaming hallways. Emma Rodriguez adjusted her worn leather messenger bag and pulled her oversized cardigan tighter around her small frame as she navigated through the crowd of chattering students. At barely 5 feet tall, with dark brown hair that she kept in a simple ponytail, she had mastered the art of moving through spaces without drawing attention. Her dark-rimmed glasses reflected the fluorescent lights as she kept her gaze focused on the geometric patterns of the floor tiles, counting steps to calm her nerves. 3 weeks had passed since her mother, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, had accepted a consulting position with a cybersecurity firm in Denver, requiring them to relocate from Phoenix. 3 weeks since Emma had promised her mother she would keep her head down, make no waves, and absolutely under no circumstances reveal the technical skills that had gotten them into trouble at her previous school. The incident in Phoenix still haunted both of them. How Emma's discovery of a grade-changing scheme had led to arrests, firings, and ultimately threats serious enough to require them to leave Arizona entirely. The hallway of Riverside Valley buzzed with the particular energy of teenagers who had grown up together, their social groups as established and rigid as the mountain peaks visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma had learned to read these dynamics quickly. Survival skill developed through years of being the outsider, the transfer student, the girl who never quite fit into predetermined categories. Near the trophy case that displayed decades of academic and athletic achievements, a cluster of students commanded attention without even trying. At the center stood Jessica Parker, whose perfectly highlighted blonde hair caught the morning light, streaming through the windows. At 17, Jessica possessed the kind of effortless confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her father owned 3 successful restaurants in town. Her mother served on the school board, and her Instagram account boasted nearly 10,000 followers who hung on her every carefully curated post. Jessica's laugh carried across the hallway, musical and bright, the kind of sound that made other students automatically turn to see what had amused her. She wore designer jeans that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe and carried a bag that Emma recognized as this season's must-have accessory. Everything about Jessica screamed success, popularity, and power. Flanking Jessica were her 2 constant companions. Katie Walsh, a petite redhead with an expensive camera always within reach, documented their lives with the dedication of a professional filmmaker. Her family had moved to Riverside from California 2 years ago when her father's tech startup got acquired, bringing Silicon Valley money to the small Colorado community. Katie's role seemed to be preserving every moment of Jessica's reign for posterity, creating content that maintained their group's image as the epitome of teenage aspiration. On Jessica's other side stood Morgan Chen, whose athletic build and piercing stare served as silent enforcement of the group's social authority. As captain of the varsity soccer team and daughter of the town's most successful real estate agent, Morgan commanded respect through both physical presence and family influence. Where Jessica ruled through charm and Katie through documentation, Morgan's power came from an aura of barely contained intensity that made other students instinctively step aside. Emma had been navigating around this trio successfully for 3 weeks, timing her movements to avoid crossing paths during the critical social hours of arrival and lunch. She had studied their patterns the way her mother had taught her to analyze network traffic, identify the peaks, understand the flow, and move through the gaps undetected. This morning, however, her usual route to first period AP literature was blocked by a delivery truck unloading supplies near the side entrance she typically used. Forced to take the main hallway route, Emma found herself walking directly past the popular group's morning gathering spot, her soft-soled sneakers making no sound on the polished floors. She almost made it. Jessica's voice cut through the ambient chatter with surgical precision. "Oh my God, is that the same shirt she wore on Monday?" The question was posed to her friends, but spoken at a volume designed to ensure Emma heard every word. "I mean, I know some people have to shop at thrift stores, but couldn't she at least rotate her outfits?" Emma's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly, but she continued walking, her pace steady and controlled. Her mother had taught her that the best response to provocation was often no response at all, a lesson learned through years of corporate environments where showing weakness could end a career. Katie immediately raised her phone, the camera already recording. "Should we start a GoFundMe for her wardrobe? I mean, as a community service?" Her voice carried the false sweetness that made the cruelty even sharper. "We could call it help." Emma looked less tragic. The surrounding students began to take notice, conversations pausing as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. In the ecosystem of high school social dynamics, moments like these served as entertainment, but also as warnings. Step out of line, and you too could become the target. Morgan stepped forward slightly, her athletic frame creating a subtle but unmistakable barrier in Emma's path. "Hey, new girl," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Didn't your parents teach you it's rude to ignore people when they're talking to you?" Emma stopped, her grip tightening on her messenger bag strap. For just a moment, her carefully maintained composure flickered, and something sharp flashed behind her glasses. A hint of the analytical mind that could dissect complex security systems and expose hidden vulnerabilities. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the mask of meek compliance she had perfected. "Sorry," Emma said quietly, her voice barely audible above the hallway noise. "I didn't realize you were talking to me." Jessica's smile widened, sensing weakness like a predator recognizing wounded prey. "Of course we were talking to you. You're pretty much the most interesting thing to happen to our school in months." She stepped closer, her designer perfume creating an almost visible boundary of wealth and privilege. "I mean, it's fascinating how someone can be so invisible and yet so noticeable at the same time." The crowd around them grew larger, students sensing the potential for drama that would fuel conversations for the rest of the day. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Some pulled out their phones, always ready to capture content that might go viral in their small social media ecosystem. Emma could feel the weight of their attention, the way her every reaction was being catalogued and judged. "We're actually trying to help you," Katie chimed in, lowering her phone but keeping it ready. "Like, integration is super important for transfer students. You can't just skulk around in the shadows forever." Her tone suggested she was performing a public service, offering wisdom that Emma should be grateful to receive. Emma's breathing remained steady, controlled through techniques her mother had taught her for managing stress during high-stakes situations. Dr. Rodriguez had worked in environments where showing panic could compromise national security, and she had passed those skills to her daughter, along with advanced programming knowledge and an understanding of human psychology that most teenagers never developed. I appreciate the concern, Emma replied, her voice gaining slightly more strength, but I'm doing fine on my own. Morgan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Fine? Is that what you call wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation and eating lunch, alone in the library? She gestured toward Emma's outfit, dark jeans, a simple grey sweater, and the messenger bag that had belonged to her mother during graduate school. This isn't fine. This is sad. The word hung in the air like a declaration, and Emma felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold recognition of the game being played. These girls had identified her as prey, and they were testing to see how she would respond. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Stay invisible, don't engage. Remember what happened in Phoenix. But another part of her, the part that had been analyzing network vulnerabilities since age 12, was already cataloging everything, she observed. Jessica's phone was a latest generation iPhone with a custom case worth more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Katie's camera equipment suggested serious financial investment in her social media ambitions. Morgan's athletic bag carried logos from expensive training facilities. Even their seemingly casual conversation revealed information. Jessica mentioned her father's restaurant opening in Denver. Katie referenced her family's upcoming trip to Europe. Morgan discussed her private soccer coaching sessions. Information was power, and Emma had been trained to notice details that others overlooked. The first bell's going to ring soon, Emma said, taking a small step toward the hallway that led to her classroom. I should get to class. Oh, don't worry about being late, Jessica said with exaggerated concern. I'm sure your teachers understand that social integration is part of education too. She exchanged glances with her friends, and Emma caught the silent communication that passed between them, the kind of wordless coordination that came from years of friendship and shared cruelty. Besides, Katie added, we were thinking of featuring you in some of our content, you know, like a makeover series, Project Emma or something like that. She raised her phone again, the camera focusing on Emma's face. Our followers love transformation stories. Emma's analytical mind immediately grasped the implications. Being featured in their social media content would make her a public target, subject to commentary from hundreds of their followers. It would eliminate any possibility of maintaining the low profile her mother had insisted upon. Worse, it would create a digital record that could follow her long after high school ended. I'd rather not, Emma said firmly, raising her hand to block the camera's view. Please don't film me. The refusal seemed to surprise them. In their world, being noticed by popular students was supposed to be an honor, not something to be declined. Jessica's expression hardened slightly, her smile becoming more calculated. Oh, come on, Jessica pressed. Don't be shy. We're trying to help you become part of the community here. Her voice carried an edge now, the friendliness becoming more obviously artificial. Unless you think you're too good for our help. The question was a trap, designed to force Emma into a lose-lose situation. Agreeing to be filmed would expose her to public humiliation, but refusing could be twisted into arrogance or ingratitude. Emma recognized the manipulation tactic. She had seen similar psychological pressure techniques in her mother's cybersecurity training materials. Methods used by social engineers to extract information from targets. I just prefer to keep a low profile, Emma said carefully. It's nothing personal. Morgan stepped closer, using her height advantage to create an intimidating presence. Everything's personal in high school, new girl. You can either be part of the community or outside of it, but you can't just float around in between. Her voice carried the weight of years spent enforcing social hierarchies through physical presence and implied threats. The first bell rang, its electronic chime echoing through the hallways and prompting most students to disperse toward their classrooms. Emma used the distraction to take another step toward her destination, but Katie moved to block her path while continuing to film. "Just one quick video," Katie insisted. "Tell our followers how excited you are to be at Riverside Valley. It'll be fun, and it might help you make friends." The camera remained focused on Emma's face, capturing her obvious discomfort for an audience that would judge her based on a few seconds of footage. Emma's mind raced through possible responses. Her mother's voice reminded her to avoid confrontation, but her own instincts, honed through years of dealing with complex problems, suggested that submission now would only invite further harassment. These girls had clearly decided she was an easy target, and backing down completely would confirm their assessment. "I really need to get to class," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "Please move." The simple request seemed to amuse them rather than prompt compliance. Jessica laughed, a sound that other students still in the hallway turned to investigate. "Did she just tell us to move?" she asked her friends with exaggerated disbelief. "That's adorable." "Maybe she doesn't understand how things work here," Morgan suggested, her tone carrying implications that extended beyond mere social dynamics. "Some people need to learn their place before they can find where they fit." Emma felt a familiar sensation, the same cold focus that descended when she encountered a particularly challenging security problem. Her breathing slowed, her vision sharpened, and her mind began processing the situation with algorithmic precision. These girls thought they understood power because they controlled social dynamics, but they had no idea what real power looked like in the digital age. "I understand perfectly," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying a new undertone that made Jessica's smile falter slightly. "I also understand that we're all going to be late for first period if this conversation continues." Without waiting for a response, Emma stepped around Katie's outstretched phone and walked toward her classroom, her movement fluid and confident in a way that surprised everyone watching. For just a moment, her carefully constructed facade of meekness had slipped, revealing something harder and more controlled underneath. Behind her, she heard Jessica's voice, no longer musical, but sharp with irritation. "This isn't over, Emma. We're going to have so much fun getting to know you better." Emma didn't turn around, but her fingers unconsciously moved to the secure phone her mother had given her, a device loaded with security applications that most people couldn't even imagine. As she disappeared around the corner toward AP Literature, she was already thinking ahead, her mind automatically cataloging everything she had observed and overheard. Jessica Parker, Katie Walsh, and Morgan Chen had just made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that quiet meant weak, that isolated meant helpless, and that their social power was the only kind of power that mattered. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In exactly 24 hours, they would be begging Emma Rodriguez for forgiveness, though none of them could possibly imagine why. AP Literature occupied the northeast corner of Riverside Valley High School, where large windows offered a view of snow-capped peaks that rose majestically beyond the town's borders. Mrs. Henderson, a woman in her 50s who had taught at the school since its opening, arranged student desks in a semicircle that encouraged discussion and engagement. The classroom walls displayed quotes from famous authors alongside student artwork inspired by classic novels, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a college seminar than a typical high school class. Emma slipped through the doorway just as the tardy bell finished ringing, her messenger bag clutched tightly against her side. The encounter in the hallway had left her more shaken than she cared to admit, not because of any fear of Jessica and her friends, but because of how easily her carefully constructed persona had nearly cracked under pressure. For 3 weeks, she had maintained perfect invisibility, following her mother's strict instructions to blend in and avoid any situation that might draw unwanted attention. The promise she had made to her mother weighed heavily on her mind as she took her usual seat in the back row. Dr. Maria Rodriguez had been devastated by the events in Phoenix, not because Emma had exposed corruption within the school district, but because the investigation that followed had put their family in genuine danger. When administrators and teachers faced criminal charges for manipulating grades in exchange for bribes, some had blamed the anonymous whistleblower who had provided evidence to authorities. Even though Emma's identity had been protected during the investigation, rumors and speculation had made their lives increasingly difficult. The breaking point had come when someone had posted their home address on social media, accompanied by threats and accusations. Dr. Rodriguez, who had spent her career protecting sensitive government networks from foreign adversaries, had been forced to protect her own family from neighbors who viewed Emma as a traitor rather than a hero. The decision to relocate to Colorado had been practical rather than voluntary, a strategic retreat from a situation that had spiraled beyond their control. Mrs. Henderson began discussing the themes of isolation and belonging in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, but Emma found herself unable to concentrate on the literary analysis. Her mind kept replaying the confrontation with Jessica, Katie, and Morgan, analyzing their behavior patterns and predicting likely escalation scenarios. She had learned to read people the way she read code, identifying vulnerabilities and attack, vectors that others missed. Jessica's aggression had been calculated rather than spontaneous, suggesting this was not their first time targeting a new student. Katie's immediate impulse to record the interaction indicated they had developed a systematic approach to harassment, creating digital evidence that could be used for ongoing humiliation. Morgan's physical positioning and threatening undertones revealed someone comfortable with intimidation tactics, likely developed through years of athletic competition and social dominance. What concerned Emma most was how naturally they had worked together, their coordination suggesting extensive practice in these scenarios. They had identified her as a target within days of her arrival, studied her routines and habits, and chosen the perfect moment to make their move. This level of planning indicated they viewed bullying not as random cruelty, but as a strategic activity requiring careful execution. During the class discussion about Lenny's vulnerability and George's protective instincts, Emma found uncomfortable parallels to her own situation. Like Lenny, she possessed capabilities that others might misunderstand or fear, while her mother played George's role as protector and guide. The difference was that Emma's strength was intellectual rather than physical, her potential for causing damage measured in exposed secrets and ruined reputations rather than broken bones. When Mrs. Henderson asked students to share their thoughts on the relationship between power and responsibility, Emma remained silent while classmates offered predictable observations about friendship and loyalty. She could have contributed insights about how knowledge itself could become a weapon, how the ability to access hidden information created ethical dilemmas that most people never faced. But speaking up would mean revealing the depth of her understanding, potentially exposing skills she had promised to keep hidden. The class period passed slowly, Emma's attention divided between literary analysis and strategic planning. By the time the bell rang for second period, she had made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. She would document everything that happened, creating a digital record of harassment that could be used as evidence if the situation escalated beyond her ability to handle alone. It was a compromise between her mother's demand for invisibility and her own instinct for self-preservation. Second period was AP Computer Science, taught by Mrs. Thompson in a state-of-the-art lab, equipped with high-end workstations and advanced networking equipment. Mrs. Thompson, a former software engineer who had transitioned to education after 20 years in Silicon Valley, immediately recognized Emma's exceptional abilities during her first week at Riverside Valley. While other students struggled with basic programming concepts, Emma completed assignments with an efficiency and elegance that suggested years of advanced training. Today's lesson focused on network security fundamentals, ironically covering concepts that Emma had mastered years earlier under her mother's guidance. As Mrs. Thompson explained the basics of encryption and authentication protocols, Emma found herself sketching more sophisticated security architectures in her notebook margins. She had learned these principles not from textbooks, but from practical application, helping her mother test government systems for vulnerabilities that could compromise national security. The other students in the class represented a cross-section of Riverside Valley's academic elite, teenagers who planned to pursue careers in technology and engineering. David Kim, the student council secretary, sat 2 rows ahead of Emma, occasionally turning to gauge her reactions to Mrs. Thompson's explanations. David had attempted to engage Emma in conversation several times since her arrival, showing genuine interest in her programming skills without the predatory curiosity displayed by Jessica's group. During the practical portion of the lesson, students worked in pairs to implement basic security protocols for a simulated network environment. Mrs. Thompson paired Emma with David, who immediately began asking technical questions that revealed both his competence and his recognition of Emma's superior knowledge. "You've done this before," David observed as Emma efficiently configured security settings that had taken him 20 minutes to understand. "Where did you learn network security? Most high schools don't teach anything this advanced." Emma hesitated, weighing her response carefully. David seemed genuinely interested rather than suspicious, but her mother's warnings about maintaining cover echoed in her mind. "My mom works in cybersecurity," she said finally. "I picked up some things from watching her work." David nodded, accepting the explanation without pressing for details. "That's cool. My dad's in tech too, but more on the business side. I've been thinking about majoring in computer science, but sometimes I wonder if I'm smart enough for the advanced stuff." He gestured toward Emma's screen, where she had implemented security measures far beyond the assignment's requirements. "Seeing what you can do makes me think I need to step up my game." For the first time since arriving at Riverside Valley, Emma felt a genuine connection with another student. David's humility and curiosity reminded her of classmates at specialized summer programs she had attended, teenagers who valued knowledge for its own sake rather than as a tool for social advancement. She found herself wanting to encourage his interest, to share some of the excitement she felt when solving complex technical challenges. "You're definitely smart enough," Emma said, her voice gaining confidence. "Programming isn't about natural talent as much as persistence and curiosity. If you're willing to keep learning and experimenting, you can master anything." She turned her screen slightly so David could better see her work. "Here, let me show you a more efficient way to implement this authentication sequence." For the next 10 minutes, Emma walked David through advanced programming techniques, explaining complex concepts with clarity and patience that impressed Mrs. Thompson, who had been discreetly observing their collaboration. Emma's ability to break down sophisticated ideas into understandable components suggested not only deep knowledge, but also natural teaching instincts. As the class period neared its end, Mrs. Thompson approached their workstation, reviewing the security implementation Emma had created. Her eyebrows rose as she examined code that incorporated professional-level features far beyond anything typically seen in high school coursework. "Emma, this is exceptional work," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice carrying genuine admiration. "Have you considered entering some of the national cybersecurity competitions? There's a significant scholarship opportunity for students who demonstrate this level of capability." Emma felt a familiar tension between pride in her abilities and fear of exposure. Competitions meant public recognition, which meant attention from people who might ask uncomfortable questions about her background and training. Her mother had specifically warned against any activities that might create a digital trail connecting Emma to their previous life in Phoenix. "I'm not really interested in competitions," Emma replied carefully. "I prefer to keep my programming as a personal hobby." Mrs. Thompson looked surprised by this response, clearly recognizing that Emma's skills represented far more than casual interest. "Well, if you change your mind, I'd be happy to help you prepare applications. Students with your abilities have opportunities to work with some very prestigious organizations." David glanced between Emma and Mrs. Thompson, sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. "What kind of organizations?" he asked, his curiosity evident. "Government agencies, major tech companies, research institutions," Mrs. Thompson explained. "Cybersecurity is a critical field right now, and talented young people can find themselves working on projects that really matter." She looked directly at Emma. "The kind of work that protects important systems and helps keep people safe." Emma's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Her mother's work involved exactly those kinds of projects, protecting infrastructure that millions of people depended on daily. The responsibility was enormous, and the pressure to maintain absolute secrecy created stress that had ultimately driven Dr. Rodriguez to seek consulting work rather than direct government employment. When the bell rang, ending second period, Emma gathered her materials quickly, eager to escape the conversation about her future prospects. David walked with her toward the hallway, still processing what he had witnessed during their collaboration. "You know," David said as they approached the classroom door, "I've been thinking about starting a programming club here at school. Something informal, just for students who want to work on interesting projects together." He paused, studying Emma's reaction. "Would you be interested in something like that?" Emma considered the offer, recognizing both its appeal and its dangers. Working with other students who shared her interests would provide intellectual stimulation and social connection she had been missing. However, any group activity would require her to demonstrate her capabilities more publicly, potentially attracting attention she needed to avoid. "Maybe," she said finally, "I'd have to think about it." David smiled, interpreting her response as more positive than she had intended. "Cool. I'll put together some ideas and let you know what I come up with." He headed toward his next class, leaving Emma alone in the hallway as students rushed past toward their own destinations. Third period was AP Physics, another class where Emma's analytical abilities exceeded those of her peers. Dr. Martinez, the physics teacher, had quickly recognized Emma's mathematical sophistication and had begun providing her with additional challenging problems to prevent boredom. Today's lesson on electromagnetic fields and signal propagation had direct applications to cybersecurity, as understanding how data moved through various transmission media was fundamental to protecting or intercepting communications. Emma found herself thinking about the wireless networks throughout Riverside Valley High School, automatically analyzing their security configurations and identifying potential vulnerabilities. The school's network infrastructure was more sophisticated than typical educational institutions, likely due to recent construction and significant technology funding. However, like most networks, it contained weaknesses that someone with her knowledge could exploit if necessary. The thought disturbed her, representing exactly the kind of thinking her mother had warned against. Dr. Rodriguez had emphasized repeatedly that Emma's skills should only be used for legitimate defensive purposes, never for unauthorized access or malicious activities. The temptation to explore systems without permission was something that had to be actively resisted, as even well-intentioned investigation could be misinterpreted as criminal behavior. During the practical laboratory portion of the class, students, worked with electronic equipment to demonstrate principles of electromagnetic radiation and signal propagation. Emma's partner, a quiet boy named Alex, who planned to study electrical engineering, was impressed by her intuitive understanding of complex circuitry and her ability to troubleshoot equipment malfunctions that confused other students. "How do you know so much about this stuff?" Alex asked, as Emma quickly identified and corrected a wiring error that had been preventing their experiment from working properly. "Most people our age have never worked with this kind of equipment." Emma shrugged, providing the same partial explanation she had given David earlier. "My mom's job involves a lot of technical stuff. I've been around computers and electronics since I was little." The answer was truthful without being complete, acknowledging her background without revealing its full scope. Alex nodded, accepting the explanation while continuing to observe Emma's work with obvious admiration. "You should definitely consider studying engineering or computer science in college. You have a natural talent for understanding how systems work." The suggestion made Emma smile sadly, knowing that her future educational and career options would be severely limited by the need to maintain her family's carefully constructed new identity. Traditional paths through prestigious universities and competitive internship programs were no longer available to her, as background checks and security clearances would inevitably reveal information her mother was determined to keep hidden. When the class ended, Emma made her way toward the cafeteria for lunch period, the time of day she most dreaded. Unlike structured classroom environments where her academic abilities provided confidence and purpose, the social chaos of lunch period left her exposed and vulnerable. She had spent the previous 3 weeks eating alone in the library, using the time to read ahead in her textbooks and work on personal programming projects. Today, however, the library was closed for maintenance, forcing Emma to find alternative arrangements for her lunch period. The cafeteria represented the epicenter of Riverside Valley's social ecosystem, where popularity hierarchies were displayed and reinforced through seating arrangements, conversation topics, and subtle signals of inclusion or exclusion. Emma purchased a simple sandwich and water from the cafeteria line, then surveyed the dining area to identify the least problematic location for solitary eating. Most tables were already occupied by established social groups, their boundaries clearly defined. Through body language and territorial markers like backpacks and jackets, she finally spotted an empty table near the windows overlooking the school's courtyard, positioned far enough from the popular groups to avoid unwanted attention. As she made her way across the cafeteria, carefully balancing her tray while navigating between tables and conversations, Emma became aware of eyes following her movement. The morning's confrontation with Jessica, Katie, and Morgan had apparently generated interest among other students, who were curious to see how the situation would develop. Emma had almost reached her chosen table when she heard Jessica's voice, calling across the cafeteria, projecting with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention in public spaces. "Emma, over here!" Jessica's tone was artificially friendly, designed to sound welcoming to casual observers while carrying undertones that Emma immediately recognized as threatening. "We saved you a seat." The cafeteria's ambient noise level decreased noticeably as conversations paused and students turned to observe this unexpected social interaction. Emma found herself at the center of attention she had spent 3 weeks avoiding, trapped in a situation where any response would be interpreted and judged by hundreds of her peers. Jessica, Katie, and Morgan occupied a prime table near the center of the cafeteria, surrounded by other popular students who served as both audience and supporting cast for their daily social performances. The table itself was strategically positioned to maximize visibility and influence, allowing its occupants to monitor and comment on activities throughout the dining area. Emma remained frozen near her intended table, calculating her options with the same analytical precision she applied to complex programming challenges. Ignoring Jessica's invitation would be interpreted as rudeness or arrogance, potentially escalating the conflict in ways that could prove difficult to manage. However, accepting the invitation would place her directly under their control, surrounded by hostile forces with no clear escape route. The seconds stretched uncomfortably as the entire cafeteria waited to see how Emma would respond to what appeared to be a generous social overture, but felt more like a spider's invitation to visit its web. Emma stood motionless in the center of the cafeteria, her lunch tray trembling slightly in her hands as every pair of eyes in the room seemed focused on her dilemma. The artificial smile on Jessica's face was perfectly crafted for their audience, radiating warmth and inclusivity that would make Emma appear ungrateful or antisocial if she declined the invitation. Behind that smile, however, Emma detected the predatory satisfaction of a hunter who had successfully cornered her prey. The weight of collective attention pressed down on Emma like a physical force, making her hyper-aware of every sound and movement in the suddenly quiet dining area. Students at nearby tables had turned in their chairs to get better views of the unfolding drama, their phones discreetly positioned to capture whatever happened next. The social media implications alone were staggering. Whatever choice Emma made would be documented, analyzed, and shared throughout the school's digital ecosystem within minutes. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds, Emma forced herself to move toward Jessica's table, recognizing that retreat was no longer an option. Her analytical mind immediately began cataloging the tactical disadvantages of her position as she approached the group. Jessica sat with her back to the wall, flanked by Katie and Morgan, in a formation that controlled access to and from the table. Other popular students occupied the remaining seats, creating an audience that would amplify whatever humiliation Jessica had planned. "I knew you'd come over," Jessica said brightly as Emma approached, her voice carrying just far enough to ensure nearby tables could hear every word. "We were just talking about how hard it must be to adjust to a new school, especially when you're so different from everyone else." Emma carefully set her tray down at the empty chair that Katie indicated, noting how it positioned her with her back to most of the cafeteria, unable to monitor potential threats or escape routes. The seating arrangement was no accident. These girls had clearly practiced this scenario before, perfecting the choreography of social intimidation. "Thanks for the invitation," Emma said quietly, unwrapping her sandwich with hands that she forced to remain steady. Her mother's training in stress management techniques proved valuable now, allowing her to maintain composure despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Morgan leaned forward across the table, her athletic frame creating an imposing presence that seemed to shrink the space around Emma. "So tell us about yourself, Emma. What was your old school like? Why did your family move to Riverside?" The question sounded casual, but felt like an interrogation, designed to extract information that could be weaponized later. Emma took a small bite of her sandwich, buying time to formulate a response that would satisfy their curiosity without revealing dangerous details. "My mum got a new job opportunity in Denver," she said finally. "The move was pretty sudden, so I didn't have much choice in the timing." Katie immediately seized on this partial information, her journalist instincts honed by years of creating content for social media audiences. "What kind of work does your mum do? Must be something pretty important to uproot your whole life for it." Her phone was positioned on the table in what appeared to be a casual arrangement, but Emma noticed the camera lens was directed toward her face. She's a consultant, Emma replied vaguely, hoping to deflect further questions about her mother's specific expertise. Technology stuff, mostly boring corporate work. Jessica's smile widened, sensing evasiveness that suggested secrets. Worth uncovering. Technology consulting sounds fascinating, actually. My dad's always talking about how businesses need experts to help them with computer security and things like that. She paused dramatically, studying Emma's reaction. Is that the kind of consulting your mom does? The question hit uncomfortably close to the truth, and Emma felt her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack under the pressure. These girls were more perceptive than she had initially credited them with, capable of conducting sophisticated psychological manipulation that went far beyond simple bullying tactics. Something like that, Emma acknowledged, hoping her non-committal response would discourage further investigation. She took another bite of her sandwich, focusing on the mechanical act of chewing to maintain her composure. Morgan exchanged a meaningful glance with Jessica, a silent communication that Emma recognized as coordination between experienced predators. It's funny, Morgan said, her tone deceptively conversational, but I could have sworn I saw your mom's car at the federal building in Denver last week. My aunt works there, and she mentioned seeing someone who looked just like you in the parking lot. Emma's blood turned cold as she realized these girls had been conducting actual surveillance on her family, gathering intelligence with a thoroughness that suggested serious intent rather than casual cruelty. The federal building housed multiple agencies, including several that her mother consulted for regularly. If they had been watching and documenting her mother's activities, they possessed information that could compromise the carefully constructed new identity her family had built. I don't think that was us, Emma said carefully, her voice betraying none of the alarm she felt. My mom hasn't mentioned any meetings in Denver recently. Katie laughed, a sound that contained no humor whatsoever. Oh, I'm sure it was just a coincidence, but it got us curious about what kinds of secrets our new classmate might be hiding. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Everyone has secrets, Emma. The question is whether you're going to share yours voluntarily, or if we need to help you with that process. The threat was now explicit, disguised as friendly conversation, but unmistakably clear in its implications. Emma realized she was dealing with individuals who had elevated social manipulation to an art form, capable of conducting psychological warfare with surgical precision. They had identified her family's vulnerability and were prepared to exploit it systematically. I don't have any secrets worth knowing about, Emma said, her voice gaining strength as her analytical mind began processing the situation as a tactical challenge rather than a social interaction. I'm just a transfer student trying to finish high school without causing any trouble. Jessica's expression shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of the calculating intelligence that lay beneath her perfect exterior. Trouble is such an interesting word choice, she mused. It implies that you've caused trouble before, doesn't it? Makes me wonder what kind of trouble a quiet little computer nerd could possibly get into. The casual reference to Emma's technical interests sent another chill through her system. These girls had been researching her background far more thoroughly than she had realized, potentially accessing information that could expose her family's carefully guarded secrets. Emma's mind raced through possible sources of information leakage, analyzing digital footprints and social connections that might have revealed more than intended. I think you're reading too much into a simple word choice, Emma replied, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the growing sense of danger. I just want to focus on my studies and graduate without any drama. Morgan snorted derisively, clearly unimpressed by Emma's attempt at deflection. Drama has a way of finding certain people, whether they want it or not, she said ominously, especially people who think they're smarter than everyone else around them. The accusation stung because it contained an element of truth that Emma couldn't entirely deny. Her intellectual capabilities did create a sense of separation from her peers, and she had indeed looked down on the social dynamics that seemed to obsess most teenagers. However, she was beginning to understand that dismissing those dynamics as trivial had been a dangerous miscalculation. "I don't think I'm smarter than anyone," Emma said, her voice carrying a note of genuine humility. "I just have different interests and priorities than most people my age." Katie raised her phone more obviously now, no longer pretending that her recording was accidental. Different interests like what? Computer hacking, internet stalking, the kind of stuff that gets people in serious trouble with the law. Her questions were designed to provoke a defensive response that could be captured and used as evidence of guilt or suspicious behavior. Emma's training in digital security included extensive education about social engineering techniques, and she recognized Katie's approach as a classic information extraction method. By making accusations and observing responses, interrogators could often identify areas of vulnerability even when subjects tried to maintain their cover stories. "I'm interested in programming and technology," Emma said calmly, refusing to take the bait, "same as thousands of other students across the country. Nothing illegal or unusual about it." Jessica leaned back in her chair, studying Emma with the intensity of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Programming is definitely a useful skill these days," she agreed thoughtfully, "especially for someone who might want to access information that doesn't belong to them. School records, personal emails, social media accounts that people think are private." The suggestion was unmistakable, and Emma realized that Jessica was essentially offering her a choice between cooperation and escalation. Submit to their social dominance willingly, or face the consequences of having her technical capabilities exposed to school administrators and potentially law enforcement agencies. "I would never use my skills for anything like that," Emma said firmly, her voice carrying conviction that was entirely genuine. "My mother taught me that technology should be used to help people, not hurt them." Morgan laughed harshly, clearly skeptical of Emma's ethical claims. "Everyone says that until they get angry enough or desperate enough to cross the line," she observed cynically, "and we're very good at making people angry and desperate." The threat was now completely explicit, no longer disguised as casual conversation or friendly interest. Emma found herself facing a choice between surrender and resistance, with no middle ground available for negotiation or compromise. Her mother's warnings about avoiding confrontation echoed in her mind, but she was beginning to understand that some confrontations were inevitable, regardless of how carefully one tried to avoid them. Before Emma could formulate a response, David Kim appeared at their table carrying his own lunch tray, his arrival creating a momentary disruption in the carefully orchestrated intimidation session. David's expression suggested he had been observing the interaction from across the cafeteria and had deliberately chosen to intervene. "Hey, Emma," David said cheerfully, his tone suggesting he was oblivious to the tension surrounding the table. "Mind if I join you guys? I wanted to continue our conversation from computer science class about that programming project." Jessica's smile became even more artificially bright as she turned her attention to this unexpected intruder. "Of course, David. We were just getting to know Emma better, learning about her interesting background and special talents." Her emphasis on the word special carried implications that David couldn't possibly understand, but that made Emma's stomach clench with anxiety. David settled into an empty chair next to Emma, either missing or choosing to ignore the undercurrents of hostility surrounding the table. "That's great. Emma's got some seriously impressive programming skills. Mrs. Thompson was telling me she's never seen a student with that level of technical knowledge." Katie's eyes lit up with predatory interest at this confirmation of Emma's abilities. Really? What kind of technical knowledge are we talking about? Like basic website design or something more advanced? Emma felt trapped between her desire to maintain her low profile and the need to prevent David from inadvertently providing ammunition to her tormentors. Any detailed description of her capabilities would give Jessica's group additional leverage to use against her, but cutting off the conversation abruptly might create suspicion or hurt David's feelings. Just the usual computer science curriculum stuff, Emma said quickly, hoping to minimize the significance of David's comments. Mrs. Thompson was probably just being encouraging. David looked confused by Emma's modest response, clearly remembering a very different demonstration of expertise during their class collaboration. Are you kidding? You implemented security protocols that most college students couldn't handle. And that troubleshooting you did when our network simulation crashed? I've never seen anyone work that fast. Morgan leaned forward with renewed interest, sensing that David's enthusiasm was revealing information that Emma wanted to keep hidden. Security protocols. That sounds pretty advanced for a high school class. What exactly did you do, Emma? Emma felt the walls closing in around her as David's well-intentioned praise created exactly the kind of attention she had spent weeks trying to avoid. Her mother's warnings about maintaining invisibility seemed increasingly prophetic as she found herself exposed to scrutiny that could unravel their carefully constructed new life. It was just a class assignment, Emma said desperately, her voice betraying stress despite her efforts to remain calm. David's exaggerating because he's being nice. Jessica's expression revealed that she recognized Emma's distress and was savoring the opportunity to apply additional pressure. "Oh, I don't think David's exaggerating at all," she said sweetly. "I think he's giving us a fascinating glimpse into our new classmates' hidden talents. Tell us more, David. What other impressive things has Emma demonstrated?" David glanced between Emma and Jessica, finally beginning to sense that something was wrong with the social dynamics at the table. Emma's obvious discomfort contrasted sharply with Jessica's eager curiosity, creating tension that even someone focused on technical subjects couldn't miss. "Maybe we should talk about this later," David said uncertainly, his enthusiasm dampened by Emma's clear reluctance to discuss her abilities. "I didn't mean to put Emma on the spot or anything." Katie waved dismissively, her phone still recording the increasingly uncomfortable conversation. "Don't be silly, David. We're all friends here, just sharing information about our classmates' interests and hobbies. Emma doesn't mind talking about her computer skills, do you, Emma?" The question was phrased as a request, but delivered as a command, backed by the implicit threat of consequences for non-compliance. Emma found herself paralyzed by the impossible choice between revealing information that could endanger her, her family, and appearing uncooperative in front of a growing audience of observers. The cafeteria around them had grown quieter as students at nearby tables tuned in to the increasingly dramatic conversation, their phones discreetly positioned to capture whatever explosive revelation might emerge from the popular girl's interrogation of the mysterious transfer student. Emma could feel the weight of their collective attention, the way her every word and gesture was being evaluated and judged by an audience that hungered for entertainment and scandal. "There's really nothing interesting to talk about?" Emma said, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to finish lunch and get to my next class." Jessica's smile turned genuinely predatory as she recognized Emma's complete capitulation, the fear and desperation that motivated her desperate attempts to deflect attention. "Of course you do," she purred, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But the day is still young, Emma, and we have so much more to learn about each other." Metir says, as the lunch period continued, Emma sat trapped at the table while Jessica, Katie, and Morgan systematically dismantled her psychological defenses, probing for weaknesses with the precision of experienced interrogators. David remained beside her, increasingly uncomfortable but uncertain how to help without making the situation worse. The walls of carefully constructed normalcy that Emma had built around her new life were beginning to crumble under sustained assault, and she could see no way to stop the process without revealing the very secrets she was so desperate to protect. The digital clock on the cafeteria wall showed that only 15 minutes had passed since she had sat down, but Emma felt as though she had been under siege for hours. 29 more minutes remained in the lunch period, and she was beginning to understand that this was only the beginning of a campaign that would continue until Jessica's group had extracted every secret they suspected she was hiding. In exactly 18 hours, they would discover just how catastrophic their curiosity had been. The remainder of Emma's lunch period passed in a haze of psychological torture disguised as friendly conversation. Jessica, Katie, and Morgan took turns probing for information, while David sat helplessly beside her, finally understanding that he had stumbled into something far more dangerous than typical teenage social dynamics. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of lunch, Emma felt as though she had survived an interrogation session designed to break down her mental defenses. That evening, Emma sat in her bedroom, staring at the secure laptop her mother had given her for emergency situations only. The device contained capabilities that would horrify most people. Tools designed for penetrating the most sophisticated digital defenses and extracting information from systems that their owners believed were impenetrable. Her mother had insisted that such power came with enormous responsibility, and that using it for personal reasons rather than legitimate security purposes would be a betrayal of everything she had been taught. But as Emma replayed the day's events, she realized that Jessica's group had essentially declared war on her family's carefully constructed new life. Their surveillance activities and systematic information gathering represented a genuine threat to her mother's career and their personal safety. The choice was no longer between maintaining ethical standards and seeking revenge. It had become a matter of survival versus destruction. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the laptop and began accessing systems that most people didn't even know existed. Her mother's training had been thorough, covering not just technical skills, but also legal and ethical frameworks for using those abilities responsibly. Tonight, however, Emma was prepared to operate in the gray areas that her mother had warned her about, motivated by desperation rather than justice. The first target was Jessica's social media empire, built on carefully curated content that presented her as the perfect combination of beauty, wealth, and social consciousness. Emma's analysis revealed a digital persona constructed through extensive manipulation with purchased followers, artificially inflated engagement metrics, and content stolen from other creators without attribution. More damaging were the private messages between Jessica and various sponsors, revealing her willingness to promote products she privately mocked and her casual use of racist language when describing potential collaboration partners. Katie's digital life proved even more vulnerable to scrutiny. Her phone contained thousands of photos and videos documenting their harassment campaigns against previous victims, creating a comprehensive archive of systematic bullying that school administrators would find impossible to ignore. Most disturbing were the recordings of private conversations with other students, captured without consent and used to spread rumors that had destroyed friendships and damaged reputations throughout Riverside Valley. Morgan's online activities revealed a pattern of academic dishonesty that stretched back years, including purchased essays, fake volunteer hours, and forged recommendation letters that had helped her maintain athletic eligibility despite failing. Her grades, Her communications with college recruiters contained outright lies about her academic performance and personal character, misrepresentations that could result in scholarship revocations and criminal charges for fraud. But Emma's most shocking discovery came when she accessed the trio's group chat history, uncovering evidence of a coordinated campaign that went far beyond typical teenage cruelty. They had systematically targeted vulnerable students for months, using psychological manipulation techniques that bordered on criminal harassment. Their victims included a boy whose family had lost their home to foreclosure, a girl struggling with an eating disorder, and several students from minority backgrounds who had been subjected to racist abuse disguised as friendly teasing. The chat logs revealed that their interest in Emma stemmed from information they had gathered about her mother's work with government agencies. They had somehow identified Dr. Rodriguez as a high-value target whose secrets could be sold to foreign intelligence services or used for blackmail purposes. Emma's technical skills weren't just a curiosity to them. They represented a potential pathway to accessing classified information worth millions of dollars on international black markets. Emma stared at her screen in horror as she realized the true scope of what she was facing. These weren't just bullies seeking social dominance. They were essentially amateur spies conducting espionage operations against American national security. Her mother's fears about exposure had been entirely justified, and Emma's attempts to maintain a low profile had failed to protect them from detection by hostile actors. The decision to act became inevitable once Emma understood the stakes involved. Her mother's consulting work protected infrastructure that millions of people depended on daily, and compromising that work could have consequences extending far beyond their personal safety. Emma's training had prepared her for exactly this kind of situation, where defensive measures required proactive neutralization of threats. Working through the night with methodical precision, Emma constructed a digital weapon designed to expose Jessica's group while protecting her own identity and her family's security. She created an anonymous whistleblower account that would systematically release evidence of their activities to school administrators, law enforcement agencies, and the social media platforms they had used to spread their influence. The evidence package Emma assembled was devastating in its comprehensiveness. Screenshots of racist messages, recordings of harassment sessions, documentation of academic fraud, proof of privacy violations, and evidence of their espionage-related activities created a portrait of systematic criminal behavior that demanded immediate intervention by authorities. But Emma's masterstroke was the way she programmed the release of this information to maximize its impact while minimizing her own exposure. The evidence would be distributed through multiple channels simultaneously, making it impossible for Jessica's group to contain or control the narrative. Social media posts would appear on their own accounts, apparently sent by them, but actually created by Emma's sophisticated automation systems. At exactly 7 a.m. the next morning, as students were arriving at Riverside Valley High School, the digital apocalypse began. Jessica's Instagram account started posting her private messages containing racist slurs and cruel comments about other students, accompanied by timestamps proving their authenticity. Katie's TikTok began releasing videos she had secretly recorded of other students in compromising situations, violating privacy laws and school policies. Morgan's Twitter account shared evidence of her academic fraud and communications with college recruiters that contained outright lies. Simultaneously, the anonymous whistleblower account began releasing comprehensive documentation to school administrators, local law enforcement, and investigative journalists who specialized in cybercrime and educational corruption. The evidence was organized and annotated with professional-grade analysis that made its significance impossible to ignore or dismiss. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Within hours, Jessica's sponsored content partnerships were cancelled as companies distanced themselves from the racist content appearing on her accounts. Katie's college applications were flagged for investigation when admissions officers received evidence of her harassment activities. Morgan's athletic scholarships were suspended pending investigation of the academic fraud allegations. But the most dramatic moment came during second period, when Principal Williams made an announcement over the school's public address system requesting that Jessica Parker, Katie Walsh, and Morgan Chen report to the administrative offices immediately. The tone of the announcement left no doubt that this was not a routine request, and students throughout the building began speculating about what could have prompted such urgent attention from school leadership. Emma sat in her AP Literature class, maintaining perfect composure while chaos erupted around her. Students were frantically checking their phones, sharing screenshots of the explosive social media posts that had been appearing throughout the morning. The evidence was so comprehensive and damning that even Jessica's most loyal supporters were unable to defend or explain her behavior. David Kim, who sat 2 seats away from Emma, looked stunned as he scrolled through the revelations. On his phone, "I can't believe this," he whispered to his neighbor. "I knew they were mean sometimes, but this is insane. Did you see the stuff about Morgan cheating on everything for years?" Emma nodded sympathetically, while internally monitoring the progress of her carefully orchestrated campaign. Every piece of evidence was being released according to schedule, creating a cascade of consequences that would be impossible for Jessica's group to escape or minimize. By lunchtime, the 3 girls had been suspended pending investigation, their parents summoned to emergency meetings with school administrators and legal representatives. Local news stations had picked up the story, turning Riverside Valley High School into the center of a regional scandal about cyberbullying and academic fraud that would dominate headlines for weeks. The final phase of Emma's plan activated during the lunch period, when she triggered the release of information to federal agencies responsible for investigating foreign influence operations and potential espionage activities. The evidence of Jessica's group's interest in accessing classified information through her mother would prompt investigations that could result in serious criminal charges and national security reviews. As Emma sat in the cafeteria eating her sandwich in peaceful solitude, she received a text message from an unknown number that made her blood run cold. "We know what you did," the message read. "This isn't over." But Emma was no longer the frightened girl who had tried desperately to maintain invisibility while predators circled around her family. She had spent the night becoming someone else entirely, someone who understood that true power came not from social media followers or athletic achievements, but from the ability to access and manipulate information in ways that most people couldn't even imagine. She typed a simple response: "Check your email." Within seconds, Jessica's phone chimed with a new message containing additional evidence that Emma had held in reserve. Screenshots of Jessica's communications with foreign contacts, proof of her attempts to recruit other students for intelligence, gathering activities, and documentation of her family's questionable financial transactions that suggested involvement in money laundering operations. "Every message you send to me will trigger the release of more evidence," Emma texted back. "Every attempt to retaliate will result in additional consequences for you and your families. The only way this stops is if you disappear completely from my life and never contact me or anyone I care about ever again." The response was immediate. "Please stop. We're sorry. We didn't know what we were dealing with." Emma stared at the message for a long moment, recognizing the fear and desperation that had driven Jessica to abandon her usual arrogance in favor of desperate pleading. The transformation was complete. The predators had become prey, and they finally understood the true cost of targeting someone they had fundamentally misjudged. "You had your chance to leave me alone," Emma replied. "You chose to escalate instead. Now you live with the consequences." Over the following weeks, the ripple effects of Emma's digital counterattack continued to expand. Jessica's family was investigated by multiple federal agencies, resulting in her father's restaurants being audited and her mother's removal from the school board. Katie faced criminal charges for privacy violations and cyberbullying, with prosecutors using her own recordings as evidence against her. Morgan lost not only her athletic scholarships, but also her admission to several universities that discovered her fraudulent applications. The investigation revealed that their harassment network had been far more extensive than anyone had realized, with dozens of victims coming forward to share their experiences once they felt safe to speak publicly. The evidence Emma had gathered became the foundation for systemic changes at Riverside Valley High School, including new policies on cyberbullying, enhanced privacy protections for students, and mandatory education about digital citizenship and ethical behavior online. David Kim approached Emma one day after computer science class, his expression mixing admiration with wariness. "I don't know exactly what you did," he said quietly, "but I know it was you who brought all this down on them. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental." Emma looked at him steadily, weighing her response. "Sometimes people who prey on others need to learn that their victims aren't as helpless as they appear," she said finally. "Justice doesn't always come from official channels." David nodded slowly, clearly recognizing that he was talking to someone far more capable and dangerous than her quiet exterior suggested. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said with nervous humor. Emma smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had been absent during her weeks of isolation and fear. "You don't have anything to worry about, David. I only target people who threaten innocent victims. You've never been anything but kind to me." Mrs. Thompson also approached Emma privately, her expression suggesting she had connected various dots that others had missed. "I've been teaching for 20 years, she said carefully, "and I've never seen bullies face consequences as swift and comprehensive as what happened to those girls. It's almost as if someone with exceptional technical skills decided to demonstrate what real power looks like." Emma maintained her innocent expression while acknowledging the subtext of Mrs. Thompson's observation. "Maybe they just finally picked on the wrong person," she suggested. "Sometimes bullies create their own downfall by targeting victims who aren't as vulnerable as they appear." Mrs. Thompson studied Emma for a long moment, clearly recognizing that she was in the presence of someone whose capabilities extended far beyond typical teenage boundaries. "Well, whoever was responsible certainly demonstrated remarkable restraint and precision," she said finally. "The evidence was released in a way that ensured justice without destroying innocent people who happened to be associated with the guilty parties." Emma nodded thoughtfully, accepting the compliment while maintaining plausible deniability about her involvement. "Justice is most effective when it's targeted precisely at those who deserve it," she agreed. "Collateral damage only creates more victims." As the school year continued, Emma found herself in an entirely different social position than she had occupied during her first weeks at Riverside Valley. Students who had previously ignored her now treated her with respectful caution, recognizing that the quiet transfer student possessed capabilities that made her a valuable ally and dangerous enemy. Her friendship with David deepened as they collaborated on programming projects that showcased their combined talents without revealing the full extent of Emma's abilities. More importantly, Emma had learned to balance her mother's protective instincts with her own need to defend herself and others from genuine threats. The incident with Jessica's group had taught her that true invisibility was impossible when facing determined adversaries. But that strategic revelation of her capabilities could be far more effective than complete concealment. The anonymous whistleblower account Emma had created continued operating throughout the school year, exposing instances of harassment and abuse that traditional authority figures had missed or ignored. Students began submitting evidence of bullying and discrimination, knowing that their reports would be investigated thoroughly and acted upon swiftly. Emma's mother never learned the specific details of how her daughter had neutralized the threat to their family's security, but she recognized the change in Emma's confidence and the sudden disappearance of the stress that had been building since their arrival in Colorado. When Dr. Rodriguez received official notification that potential security threats related to her consulting work had been identified and eliminated, she understood that Emma had somehow protected them both using skills that went far beyond anything she had formally taught her daughter. The promise Emma had made to avoid trouble remained technically intact, as she had never initiated conflict or used her abilities for personal gain rather than legitimate defense. She had simply demonstrated to potential threats that targeting her family would result in consequences far exceeding any possible benefits they might have anticipated. On the anniversary of their arrival in Riverside, Emma stood in the same hallway where Jessica had first targeted her for harassment, surrounded by friends who valued her intelligence and loyalty without fearing her capabilities. The scared transfer. Student who had counted floor tiles to manage her anxiety had been replaced by someone who understood that true strength came not from hiding one's abilities, but from using them responsibly to protect the innocent and punish those who preyed on the vulnerable. Emma Rodriguez had learned that sometimes the best way to remain invisible was to make your enemies disappear instead. The Colorado winter had transformed Riverside Valley into a postcard-perfect mountain town with snow-covered peaks gleaming against crystal blue skies and evergreen trees dusted with powder that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. Emma Rodriguez stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the school's new cybersecurity lab, watching students make their way across the campus courtyard, their breath visible in small puffs of vapor as they hurried between buildings. The lab itself represented one of the most visible changes that had emerged from the events of the previous fall. What had begun as an investigation into cyberbullying at Riverside Valley High School had evolved into a comprehensive review of digital safety policies that ultimately attracted attention from state education officials and federal agencies concerned about protecting students from online threats. Emma's anonymous evidence collection had provided the foundation for policy changes that were now being implemented in school districts across Colorado. Mrs. Thompson approached from the bank of advanced workstations that lined the lab's perimeter, carrying a tablet displaying the latest enrollment statistics for their digital citizenship program. "We've got 37 students registered for next semester's advanced cybersecurity course," she announced with satisfaction. "That's more than double what we had hoped for when we first proposed the program." Emma nodded, pleased by the response but not entirely surprised. The events of the fall semester had awakened many students to the reality that digital skills could be weapons or shields, depending on how they were used. The program she had helped design focused on ethical hacking, privacy protection, and responsible disclosure of security vulnerabilities, giving students tools to protect themselves and others from online predators. "David's been instrumental in recruiting new students," Emma observed, gesturing toward the corner where David Kim was leading a group of underclassmen through basic programming exercises. His presentation to the student council last month really helped people understand why digital literacy isn't just about career preparation anymore. Mrs. Thompson smiled, watching David patiently explain debugging techniques to a freshman who was struggling with her first Python script. He's developed remarkable leadership skills since you two started collaborating. I think having someone with your expertise as a friend gave him confidence to take on more challenging projects. The friendship between Emma and David had indeed deepened over the months since the incident with Jessica's group, built on shared intellectual curiosity and mutual respect for each other's abilities. David had never pressed Emma for details about her role in exposing the harassment network, but he had clearly understood that her capabilities extended far beyond what she demonstrated in their official coursework. His discretion and loyalty had earned Emma's trust in ways that more aggressive attempts at friendship could never have achieved. Speaking of challenging projects, Mrs. Thompson continued, I received an interesting email this morning from Dr. Sarah Chen at Colorado State University. She's leading a research initiative on protecting teenagers from social engineering attacks, and she specifically requested permission to interview you about your insights into how young people can recognize and defend against manipulation tactics. Emma considered the request carefully, weighing the potential benefits against the risks of increased visibility. Over the past 6 months, she had gradually become more comfortable with selective disclosure of her expertise, particularly when it served educational purposes that could help other students avoid the kind of targeting she had experienced. What kind of interview are we talking about? Emma asked. Academic research or something that might be published more widely? Academic research initially, Mrs. Thompson replied, but Dr. Chen mentioned that their findings might eventually be incorporated into educational materials for high school students nationwide. Your perspectives as someone who has both experienced sophisticated social engineering attacks and successfully defended against them could provide valuable insights for developing protective curricula. The irony of being sought out as an expert on defending against the very tactics she had turned against her attackers was not lost on Emma. However, she recognized that her unique position as both victim and victor gave her understanding that purely theoretical researchers might lack. Her experience had taught her that effective defense required not just technical knowledge, but also psychological resilience and strategic thinking that most teenagers were never taught to develop. I'd be willing to participate, Emma decided, as long as my specific technical capabilities and family background remain confidential. I can share insights about recognizing manipulation tactics and building psychological defenses without revealing operational details that might compromise ongoing security work. Mrs. Thompson nodded approvingly, recognizing Emma's continued need to balance helpful participation with prudent operational security. I'll coordinate with Dr. Chen to establish appropriate boundaries for the interview. I think your contributions could help protect a lot of students who might otherwise become victims of the kind of systematic harassment you faced. Across the lab, David finished his tutoring session and approached their conversation, his expression mixing excitement with nervous anticipation. Emma, I wanted to ask you about something, he began, pulling up a chair to join them. I've been working on a proposal for a student-led cybersecurity awareness program that could be implemented at other schools in the district. Nothing too advanced, just basic digital hygiene and recognition of common attack vectors. Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued by David's initiative. What kind of program are you envisioning? Presentations, workshops, hands-on training? All of the above, potentially, David replied, his enthusiasm growing as he outlined his vision. I was thinking we could create a peer education model where students teach other students about protecting themselves online. Adults talking to teenagers about internet safety often comes across as out of touch. But when peers share real experiences and practical knowledge, the message tends to resonate better. The proposal impressed Emma with its psychological sophistication and practical applicability. David had clearly learned from observing her approach to problem-solving, recognizing that effective solutions required understanding human motivation as much as technical implementation. His suggestion that peer education would be more effective than adult instruction demonstrated insight into teenage psychology that could make the program genuinely impactful. "I think that's a brilliant approach," Emma said, her voice carrying genuine admiration for David's strategic thinking. Teenagers are much more likely to take advice seriously when it comes from someone who understands their social environment and speaks their language. Have you given any thought to how we might structure the curriculum? David's face lit up at Emma's enthusiastic response and her use of the word "we" in reference to the project. "I was hoping you'd be interested in collaborating on this. Your understanding of both the technical and psychological aspects of cybersecurity would be invaluable for developing effective training materials." Mrs. Thompson watched the exchange with satisfaction, recognizing that Emma's influence on David's development had been profoundly positive. The shy, insecure student who had struggled with basic programming concepts 6 months earlier had evolved into a confident leader, proposing innovative solutions to complex social problems. Emma's mentorship had provided not just technical knowledge, but also strategic thinking skills that would serve David well throughout his academic and professional career. "I'd love to work on this with you," Emma confirmed, already beginning to mentally outline potential program components. "We could start by identifying the most common attack vectors that teenagers encounter, then develop interactive scenarios that let students practice recognizing and responding to threats in safe environments." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock on the lab door, followed by the entrance of Principal Williams, carrying a folder that suggested official school business. His expression was serious but not alarmed, indicating important rather than urgent matters requiring attention. "Emma, I hope I'm not interrupting anything critical," Principal Williams said, approaching their small group near the windows. "I wanted to speak with you about a rather unusual request we received from the Department of Education regarding your role in developing our new digital safety protocols." Emma felt a familiar tension as official attention focused on her activities. Even though she had been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries in all her school-related work, her mother's warnings about government scrutiny remained relevant, particularly given the ongoing investigations related to the intelligence gathering activities that Jessica's group had been conducting. "What kind of request?" Emma asked carefully, maintaining neutral body language while internally preparing for various scenarios that might require damage control or strategic misdirection. Principal Williams opened his folder and extracted a letter bearing official Department of Education letterhead. "They're conducting a study of effective interventions for cyberbullying prevention, and Riverside Valley has been selected as a case study because of the dramatic improvement in our incident reporting and resolution rates." They specifically mentioned wanting to interview students who were involved in developing our new approaches to digital citizenship education. The request was flattering but potentially problematic, as any detailed investigation of Emma's role in the school's transformation might reveal connections to activities that exceeded the boundaries of legitimate student involvement. However, refusing to participate could create suspicion and draw exactly the kind of unwanted attention she was trying to avoid. "I'd be happy to discuss our educational programs," Emma replied diplomatically, "though I should mention that my contributions have been primarily focused on curriculum development rather than any specific incident resolution. My interest is in prevention and education rather than enforcement or investigation." Principal Williams nodded, clearly recognizing Emma's need to maintain appropriate boundaries while still acknowledging her valuable contributions. That's exactly the perspective they're interested in. The department is particularly impressed by how our preventive education approach has reduced bullying incidents rather than simply punishing offenders after damage has already been done. Mrs. Thompson interjected supportively. Emma's insights into how students actually think about and interact with technology have been crucial for developing programs that address real-world threats rather than theoretical scenarios. Her ability to translate complex security concepts into practical guidance that teenagers can understand and apply has been remarkable. David added his own endorsement, his voice carrying conviction born of personal experience working with Emma. She has this incredible ability to anticipate how people will try to exploit psychological vulnerabilities, then design countermeasures that strengthen potential victims without making them paranoid or fearful. It's like she understands both the technical and human sides of cybersecurity better than most adults I've met. Emma appreciated their support while recognizing that their praise was creating exactly the kind of high-profile attention that could complicate her family's security situation. However, she had learned over the past months that complete invisibility was neither possible nor necessary, as long as she carefully managed the information she revealed and the contexts in which she operated. I'm willing to participate in the department's study, Emma decided, with the understanding that my family's privacy needs to be protected and that I'll be discussing educational approaches rather than operational details of any specific security work. Principal Williams smiled, clearly pleased by Emma's willingness to contribute to research that could benefit students throughout the country. I'll coordinate with their research team to establish appropriate parameters for the interview. I think your perspectives could help shape policies that protect a lot of young people from the kind of systematic harassment that unfortunately seems to be increasing in schools nationwide. As Principal Williams departed with his folder of official correspondence, Emma found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed since those terrifying first weeks at Riverside Valley. The frightened transfer student who had counted floor tiles to manage anxiety had evolved into someone who was consulted by government agencies and university researchers about protecting other young people from digital threats. The transformation hadn't been without costs, as Emma had been forced to abandon her mother's preferred strategy of complete invisibility in favor of selective visibility that served protective purposes. However, she had learned to balance her family's security needs with her own desire to use her capabilities for positive impact, finding ways to help others without exposing the full extent of her technical abilities or her family's sensitive background. Later that afternoon, as the lab began to empty and students headed home for dinner with their families, Emma received a text message from her mother asking about her day. Dr. Rodriguez had gradually become more comfortable with Emma's increased visibility at school, recognizing that her daughter had developed sophisticated judgment about managing risks while pursuing meaningful work. "Productive day," Emma replied to her mother's text, working on some new educational programs that might help other students avoid the kind of problems we dealt with last year. Also got a request from the Department of Education to participate in a research study about cyberbullying prevention. Her mother's response came quickly. "Proud of how you've learned to balance helping others with protecting our family. Your judgment has become excellent. Let's discuss the research request over dinner so we can make sure appropriate boundaries are maintained." Emma smiled at her mother's supportive message, recognizing how far their relationship had evolved since the crisis that had brought them to Colorado. Dr. Rodriguez had learned to trust Emma's strategic thinking and decision-making capabilities. while Emma had gained deeper appreciation for her mother's protective instincts and security expertise. As she gathered her materials and prepared to leave the lab, Emma caught sight of her reflection in the darkened windows that faced the now empty courtyard. The girl looking back at her bore little resemblance to the terrified transfer student, who had tried desperately to remain invisible during those first weeks at Riverside Valley. Her posture was confident without being aggressive, her expression alert but relaxed, and her eyes held the quiet satisfaction of someone who had learned to use her capabilities wisely. David appeared beside her at the windows, following her, gaze toward their shared reflection. "It's weird to think about how different everything is now compared to when you first arrived," he observed thoughtfully. "I remember you seemed so scared and isolated, like you were expecting something terrible to happen at any moment." Emma nodded, remembering the constant anxiety that had dominated those early weeks when she had believed that safety required complete invisibility. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not of normal high school stuff, but of being discovered by people who might use information about me and my family in dangerous ways. It turned out that trying to hide completely just made me more vulnerable to exactly the kind of people I was afraid of." "So what changed?" David asked, genuinely curious about Emma's transformation from fearful outsider to confident leader. Emma considered the question carefully, recognizing that her answer needed to be truthful without revealing operational details that could compromise ongoing security considerations. "I learned that real safety comes from being strong enough to defend yourself and others, not from hiding and hoping threats will pass you by," she said finally. "Sometimes the best way to protect what matters to you is to make sure that people who might target it understand the consequences of their actions." David nodded slowly, clearly understanding that Emma's answer contained layers of meaning that she wasn't ready to fully explain. Their friendship had been built on mutual respect for boundaries as much as shared interests, and he had learned not to press for information that she wasn't prepared to share. "Well, whatever changed, I'm glad it happened," David said with genuine warmth. "You've made this place better for a lot of people, and not just because of what happened to Jessica and her friends. The programs we've developed, the way you've helped other students understand digital security, the confidence you've given people to stand up for themselves, all of that matters more than any specific incident." As they walked together toward the main exit, Emma reflected on David's observation about the broader impact of her transformation. The defeat of Jessica's harassment network had been satisfying and necessary, but the lasting changes in school culture and student empowerment represented more meaningful victories. Students who had been afraid to report bullying now felt confident that their complaints would be taken seriously and addressed effectively. Digital literacy had become a source of personal empowerment rather than just academic requirement. Most importantly, the idea that victims of harassment were not helpless had become embedded in the school's collective consciousness. The parking lot was nearly empty as Emma and David emerged from the building, their breath visible in the crisp mountain air as they headed toward their respective rides home. Emma's mother sat in their sedan reading case files on her secure tablet, while David's father waited in a hybrid SUV that still displayed bumper stickers from the previous election cycle. "See you tomorrow," David called as he headed toward his father's vehicle. "I'll work on outlining the peer education curriculum tonight and send you my thoughts for review." Emma waved goodbye, then approached her mother's car with a sense of satisfaction about the day's productive conversations and future possibilities. As she settled into the passenger seat, Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her tablet with the kind of smile that indicated both professional pride and maternal satisfaction. "Good day," her mother asked, starting the engine and beginning their short drive through Riverside's quiet residential streets toward their comfortable rental house. "Very good," Emma replied, fastening her seatbelt and settling back to enjoy the familiar mountain scenery passing outside her window. I think we're building something that could really help protect other students from the kind of targeting we experienced. Not just reactive responses after damage has been done, but proactive education that makes potential victims harder to manipulate in the first place. Dr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly, recognizing her daughter's strategic thinking and commitment to using her capabilities for protective rather than aggressive purposes. That's exactly the kind of work I hoped you would find your way toward, she said with quiet pride. Using exceptional abilities to strengthen others rather than simply defeating enemies represents the highest form of cybersecurity practice. As their car wound through neighborhoods decorated with holiday lights and snow-covered gardens, Emma felt a deep sense of contentment about the direction her life had taken since those difficult early weeks at Riverside Valley. She had learned to balance her mother's protective concerns with her own need to make meaningful contributions, finding ways to help others without exposing her family to unnecessary risks. More importantly, she had discovered that true strength came not from the ability to defeat opponents, but from the wisdom to know when and how to use her capabilities responsibly. The quiet transfer student who had once counted floor tiles to manage her anxiety had evolved into someone who could teach others to protect themselves while maintaining the ethical standards that her mother had instilled. Emma Rodriguez had learned that sometimes the best way to remain safe was to make the world safer for everyone. The spring graduation ceremony at Riverside Valley High School took place on a perfect Colorado morning, with the Rocky Mountains providing a majestic backdrop for the celebration of academic achievement and personal growth. Emma Rodriguez sat among her fellow graduates in the front section, reserved for students receiving special recognition. Her cap and gown pristine, despite the light breeze that occasionally disturbed the carefully organized rows of chairs arranged on the football field. Principal Williams approached the podium to deliver his annual address to graduating seniors, their families, and the broader community that had gathered to witness this milestone moment. His speech began with traditional acknowledgments of academic excellence and athletic achievements, but gradually shifted toward discussing the transformative changes that had occurred at Riverside Valley over the past 2 years. Education is not merely about acquiring knowledge, Principal Williams declared, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd through the state-of-the-art sound system that had been installed as part of the school's recent technology upgrades. True education involves learning to use that knowledge responsibly, ethically, and in service of others who may be less fortunate or less capable of protecting themselves. Emma listened to these words with a mixture of pride and humility, recognizing that her own journey from frightened transfer student to respected leader embodied exactly the kind of transformation that Principal Williams was describing. The past 18 months had taught her that exceptional capabilities created exceptional responsibilities, and that true strength was measured not by one's ability to defeat enemies, but by one's commitment to protecting the innocent and empowering the vulnerable. This year's graduating class includes students who have demonstrated remarkable leadership in areas that extend far beyond traditional academic subjects. Principal Williams continued, his gaze briefly meeting Emma's as he spoke. They have shown us that young people possess the wisdom, creativity, and moral courage necessary to address some of our most challenging social problems, particularly those related to digital safety and cybersecurity awareness. The cybersecurity education program that Emma and David had developed during their junior year had indeed become a model for schools throughout Colorado and several neighboring states. Their peer-to-peer teaching approach had proven far more effective than traditional adult-led instruction at helping teenagers understand and defend against online threats. More importantly, The program had created a culture of mutual protection and support that had dramatically reduced incidents of cyberbullying and digital harassment throughout the district. Dr. Maria Rodriguez sat in the family section, her expression radiating maternal pride mixed with professional admiration for her daughter's accomplishments. The past 2 years had been challenging for both of them as they navigated the delicate balance between Emma's growing public profile and the security considerations that still governed their family's existence. However, they had successfully established boundaries that allowed Emma to make meaningful contributions while maintaining the operational security necessary to protect Dr. Rodriguez's sensitive consulting work. The relationship between mother and daughter had evolved significantly since those terrifying early weeks when Emma had felt trapped between her promise to remain invisible and her instinct for self-preservation. Dr. Rodriguez had learned to trust Emma's judgment about managing risks and opportunities, while Emma had gained deeper appreciation for the complex factors that influenced her mother's protective decisions. Their partnership had become truly collaborative, with both women contributing their unique expertise to ensure their family's continued safety and success. David Kim, who sat 2 seats away from Emma in the graduation lineup, had blossomed into a confident technology leader whose own achievements rivaled those of students at much larger and better-funded schools. His transformation from insecure novice to accomplished programmer and teacher demonstrated the profound impact that mentorship and collaborative learning could have on individual development. More importantly, David's success illustrated how Emma's influence had multiplied through others, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond her direct contributions. The friendship between Emma and David had deepened over their shared commitment to using technology for positive social impact. David's natural teaching abilities had complemented Emma's strategic thinking and technical expertise, creating a partnership that had achieved more than either could have accomplished alone. Their collaborative approach had become a template for student-led initiatives throughout the school, inspiring other young people to identify problems in their communities and develop innovative solutions. Mrs. Thompson sat among the faculty members on the stage, her expression reflecting satisfaction with the remarkable growth she had witnessed in both Emma and David over the past 2 years. As the teacher who had first recognized Emma's exceptional capabilities and David's leadership potential, she took particular pride in how both students had learned to balance technical excellence with ethical responsibility. The cybersecurity lab that had grown from their collaboration now served as a model facility that attracted visitors from universities and government agencies seeking to understand effective approaches to digital citizenship education. The success of Riverside Valley's cybersecurity program had indeed attracted attention from researchers and policymakers at national levels. Emma's anonymous contributions to academic research on social engineering defense had influenced curriculum development at schools across the country, while her insights into adolescent psychology and digital behavior had informed federal guidelines for protecting young people from online predators. Her ability to articulate complex concepts in accessible language had made her a valuable consultant for organizations developing educational materials for teenage audiences. Principal Williams concluded his address by announcing the recipients of Special Recognition Awards for Community Service and Leadership. Emma's name was called for the Distinguished Service Award, acknowledging her role in developing programs that had protected countless students from digital harassment and empowered them with knowledge necessary for safe online participation. As she walked across the stage to receive her award, Emma reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that first terrifying confrontation with Jessica Parker and her followers. The investigation that had followed Emma's exposure of the harassment network had ultimately revealed connections to organized cybercrime operations that extended far beyond typical teenage bullying. Jessica's group had been recruited by sophisticated criminals who specialized in identity theft and financial fraud, using high school students as unwitting agents for gathering personal information about potential victims. The federal investigation had resulted in multiple arrests and the dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had been operating in several states. Jessica herself had eventually pleaded guilty to charges related to identity theft and cyberstalking, receiving a sentence that included significant community service requirements focused on educating other young people about the legal and personal consequences of participating in online harassment. Her transformation from predator to advocate had been genuine, driven by her recognition of how close she had come to destroying her own future through participation in criminal activities. Katie Walsh had faced similar charges, but had cooperated more extensively with investigators, providing information that helped authorities understand how young people were being recruited and manipulated by organized crime networks. Her insider knowledge of social media manipulation techniques had proven valuable for developing countermeasures that protected other teenagers from similar exploitation. The experience had redirected her interest toward digital forensics and cybercrime investigation, leading to her acceptance into a competitive university program that would prepare her for law enforcement or corporate security work. Morgan Chen's athletic scholarships had been permanently revoked due to her academic fraud, but she had used the experience as motivation for genuine academic achievement that eventually earned her admission to a respected university program. In sports management, her understanding of how competitive pressure could drive young people toward unethical choices had made her an effective advocate for integrity in youth athletics, particularly regarding the use of performance-enhancing substances and academic manipulation. The broader impact of the investigation had extended throughout Riverside Valley's community, prompting parents, educators, and local officials to examine how digital technologies were being used to exploit and manipulate young people. The resulting awareness campaign had educated adults about warning signs of cyberbullying and online predation, while empowering them with tools for protecting their children without restricting their legitimate use of digital technologies. Emma's role in exposing the criminal network had remained largely confidential, protected by her status as a minor and the sensitive nature of the investigation. However, her contributions to developing educational responses and preventive measures had been publicly acknowledged and celebrated. The distinction between her defensive actions and her educational work had allowed her to receive appropriate recognition while maintaining the operational security that her family required. As the graduation ceremony continued with the traditional procession of students receiving their diplomas, Emma considered the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. The frightened transfer student who had counted floor tiles to manage anxiety had evolved into a confident young woman who was prepared to tackle complex challenges in cybersecurity and digital rights advocacy. More importantly, she had learned to balance her exceptional capabilities with ethical principles that would guide her throughout her adult career. The University of Colorado had offered Emma a full scholarship to study computer science with a specialization in cybersecurity policy, recognizing both her technical abilities and her demonstrated commitment to using those abilities for positive social impact. The program would allow her to work with leading researchers while maintaining the flexibility necessary to accommodate her family's ongoing security considerations. Dr. Rodriguez had carefully vetted the university's security protocols and research, partnerships, ensuring that Emma's participation would not compromise their family's carefully maintained privacy. David had been accepted into a prestigious technology program at Stanford University, where he planned to study artificial intelligence and machine learning with applications to educational technology. His vision involved developing systems that could personalize cybersecurity education for individual students, adapting content and teaching methods to match different learning styles and risk profiles. The collaboration between Emma and David was expected to continue despite their geographical separation, as both universities were eager to support joint research projects that addressed pressing social needs. Mrs. Thompson had been promoted to district-level administration, where she would oversee the expansion of cybersecurity education programs to all schools in the region. Her experience with Emma and David's innovative approaches had convinced educational officials that student-led initiatives could be far more effective than traditional top-down instruction methods. The peer education model that had proven successful at Riverside Valley was being adapted for implementation in diverse communities with varying technological resources and expertise levels. As Emma's name was called for the diploma presentation, she walked across the stage with confident steps that reflected her transformation from victim to victor to protector. Principal Williams shook her hand warmly, his expression conveying appreciation not just for her academic achievements, but for the positive changes she had brought to their entire educational community. The applause from the audience was sustained and enthusiastic, reflecting genuine recognition of her contributions rather than mere ceremonial politeness. Dr. Rodriguez wiped away tears of pride as she watched her daughter receive the diploma that represented not just academic completion, but successful navigation of extraordinarily challenging circumstances. The past 2 years had tested both their resilience and their relationship, but they had emerged stronger and more unified in their commitment to using their unique capabilities for protecting others. Emma's success at Riverside Valley had validated Dr. Rodriguez's difficult decision to allow her daughter greater visibility and involvement in meaningful work. Following the ceremony, Emma was surrounded by classmates, teachers, and family members, offering congratulations and expressing appreciation for her leadership and friendship. Many students who had benefited from the cybersecurity education programs took the opportunity to thank Emma personally for creating resources that had protected them from online threats. Parents expressed gratitude for the peace of mind that came from knowing their children had been taught to recognize and respond appropriately to digital dangers. David approached Emma as the crowd began to disperse, his expression mixing excitement about their future opportunities with sadness about the end of their daily collaboration. "It's going to be weird not working together every day," he admitted, adjusting his graduation cap that had been knocked askew by the enthusiastic celebration. "But I'm excited about the research projects we've discussed for next year. Having you as a remote collaborator will probably be even more effective than working in the same lab." Emma nodded, sharing David's mixture of anticipation and nostalgia about their evolving partnership. "Technology makes distance less relevant for intellectual collaboration," she observed, "but I'll definitely miss the energy of brainstorming sessions and the satisfaction of seeing immediate results from our educational experiments." Riverside Valley provided the perfect environment for learning how to turn ideas into practical solutions. Mrs. Thompson joined their conversation, carrying a folder containing documentation that Emma would need for her transition to university-level research work. I wanted to make sure you have copies of all the program evaluation data and student feedback surveys, she explained, handing Emma the materials. The University of Colorado researchers are very interested in understanding what made your approaches so effective, and this documentation should provide valuable baseline information for scaling the programs to larger populations. The folder contained evidence of remarkable success that extended far beyond traditional academic metrics. Incidents of cyberbullying at Riverside Valley had decreased by 87% over the 2 years since Emma's arrival, while student confidence in identifying and reporting digital threats had increased proportionally. More significantly, the peer education approach had created lasting behavioral changes that persisted even after students graduated and moved to different environments. Emma accepted the folder with genuine gratitude, recognizing that Mrs. Thompson's meticulous documentation had been crucial for demonstrating the effectiveness of their innovative approaches. This data will be invaluable for convincing other educators that student-led initiatives can achieve results that traditional instruction methods often miss, Emma said appreciatively. The evidence shows that young people are capable of taking responsibility for their own safety and the safety of their peers when they're given appropriate tools and encouragement. As the graduation celebration gradually wound down and families began departing for private gatherings, Emma found herself standing once again in the courtyard, where she had experienced those first terrifying encounters with Jessica's harassment network. The physical space remained unchanged, but her relationship to it had been completely transformed. Instead of representing danger and vulnerability, the courtyard now symbolized her successful transition from victim to protector. Dr. Rodriguez approached her daughter with car keys in hand, ready to begin the drive home for their own family. "Celebration of this significant milestone. Ready to go?" she asked, her voice carrying undertones of pride and anticipation about Emma's future opportunities. "I thought we could stop by that mountain overlook you like for some photos before heading home for dinner." Emma took one final look around. The campus that had been the setting for her transformation from frightened outsider to confident leader. The buildings and landscaping showed signs of the investments that had been made in technology infrastructure and security systems, improvements that had been motivated partly by the events surrounding her arrival. More importantly, the atmosphere felt different now, characterized by mutual respect and collaborative problem-solving rather than the predatory social dynamics that had once dominated student interactions. "I'm ready," Emma replied, joining her mother for the short walk to their car. "It's time to start the next chapter." As they drove through Riverside's quiet streets toward the mountain road that led to their favorite scenic overlook, Emma reflected on the lessons she had learned during her time at Riverside Valley High School. The most important discovery had been that true strength came not from the ability to defeat opponents, but from the wisdom to use exceptional capabilities in service of others who needed protection or empowerment. The anonymous whistleblower account that Emma had created to expose Jessica's harassment network had continued operating throughout her senior year, providing a secure channel for students to report bullying and abuse without fear of retaliation. However, the need for such interventions had decreased dramatically as the school's culture had shifted toward mutual support and collaborative problem-solving. Students had learned to address conflicts directly and constructively rather than allowing them to escalate into systematic harassment campaigns. Emma's influence had extended beyond Riverside Valley through her contributions to research on adolescent cybersecurity and digital citizenship education. Her insights into how young people actually thought about and interacted with technology had helped adult experts develop more effective approaches to protection and education. The combination of technical expertise and psychological understanding that she brought to these challenges had made her a valuable consultant despite her youth. The mountain overlook provided a spectacular view of the valley below, with Riverside Valley High School visible among the clusters of buildings that comprise the town's residential and commercial districts. Emma stood at the railing taking photographs with her mother, both women appreciating the symbolic significance of viewing their former challenges from this elevated perspective. "I'm proud of how you've learned to balance your capabilities with your responsibilities," Dr. Rodriguez said as they prepared to return to their car. "The choices you've made about when and how to use your skills have demonstrated wisdom that many adults never develop. You've shown that exceptional abilities create opportunities for exceptional service." Emma nodded, understanding that her mother's praise reflected recognition of growth that extended far beyond technical expertise or academic achievement. The past 2 years had taught her that ethical decision-making was often more challenging than technical problem-solving, requiring careful consideration of consequences that might not become apparent until much later. As they drove home through the gathering dusk, Emma considered the future opportunities that awaited her at the University of Colorado and beyond. The cybersecurity field offered numerous pathways for making meaningful contributions to protecting individuals and institutions from digital threats. However, she was particularly interested in developing educational approaches that would empower other young people with knowledge and skills necessary for safe participation in an increasingly connected world. The house that Dr. Rodriguez had rented for their 2 years in Riverside had become a genuine home, filled with comfortable furniture and personal touches that reflected their successful integration into the local community. Emma's bedroom walls displayed certificates of achievement alongside photographs of friends and mentors who had supported her growth. The secure computer setup that had once been used primarily for defensive purposes now served mainly for legitimate research and educational projects. During dinner, Emma and her mother discussed plans for the summer months before Emma's departure for university. Dr. Rodriguez had arranged for Emma to intern with a cybersecurity consulting firm in Denver, where she would gain experience with corporate security practices while contributing to projects that protected businesses from sophisticated digital attacks. The internship would provide valuable practical experience while allowing Emma to remain close to home during her transition to adult independence. The firm has an excellent reputation for ethical practices and client protection, Dr. Rodriguez explained as they shared a meal of Emma's favorite dishes prepared specially for the graduation celebration. Their work involves helping organizations defend against exactly the kinds of threats that we've dealt with personally, so your experience will be directly relevant to their mission. More importantly, they understand the need for discretion and operational security in sensitive consulting. Relationships. Emma appreciated her mother's careful vetting of the internship opportunity, recognizing that Dr. Rodriguez's extensive network in the cybersecurity community provided access to positions that would be both educational and secure. The chance to work on corporate security challenges would complement the educational focus of her university studies, providing a well-rounded foundation for her eventual career in cybersecurity policy and digital rights advocacy. As the evening progressed, Emma received messages from classmates and teachers expressing continued appreciation for her contributions and excitement about her future opportunities. David sent a long text describing his plans for developing educational technology solutions during his first year at Stanford, including ideas for platforms that could facilitate collaboration between students at different institutions. Mrs. Thompson shared news about additional school districts that were interested in implementing peer education programs based on the Riverside Valley model. The responses confirmed that Emma's influence would continue expanding even after her departure from Riverside Valley, as the programs and approaches she had helped develop became templates for addressing similar challenges in other communities. The peer education model had proven particularly adaptable to different environments and populations, suggesting that student-led initiatives could become standard components of cybersecurity education nationwide. Before retiring for the evening, Emma spent time in her room, organizing materials and memories from her high school experience. The secure journal where she had documented her early fears and strategies now contained entries describing successful educational initiatives and meaningful friendships. The transformation documented in those pages provided compelling evidence of how dramatically circumstances could change when individuals chose to use their capabilities constructively rather than defensively. The photograph of her receiving the Distinguished Service Award during graduation occupied a place of honor on her desk, alongside images of collaborative work sessions with David and group photos from cybersecurity education events. These visual reminders of positive achievements provided motivation for continuing to pursue work that would protect and empower others facing similar challenges. As Emma prepared for sleep on this milestone evening, she felt profound satisfaction about the journey that had brought her from terrified victim to confident protector. The lessons learned during her time at Riverside Valley would guide her throughout her adult career, reminding her that true security came from building strength in communities rather than simply defending against individual threats. Emma Rodriguez had discovered that sometimes the best way to protect yourself was to make sure everyone around you was safer too. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.